And I look in the mirror and I say, who are you? What are you becoming? There's out in harm's way. That in itself right there really, really was hard for me. People usually ask me about the long runs. They remember the open field, the speed, the touchdowns, maybe a play where I found a hole and suddenly there was nobody left in front of me. I understand that. Those are the plays people keep. But when you are the one carrying the football, you remember something different. You remember the linebackers waiting inside. You remember the defenders who could close a gap before you thought it was open. And you remember the guys who made you check where they were lined up before the ball was snapped. I played against a lot of great defensive players in my career. Some could hit, some could run. Some seemed to know where I wanted to go almost before I did. There are 5 men I still think about when somebody asks me who gave me the hardest time. They were all different, and the toughest one did something very few defenders could do. He could change the way I thought before the play even started. Number 5, Harry Carson. I was 27 when we went into Giant Stadium late in the 1981 season. By then, I had been in the league long enough to know that a running back could be having a good year and still walk into one stadium where nothing came easy. That afternoon in New York was one of those days. The thing about Harry Carson was that he did not need to make much noise. He did not have to move around before the snap just to make sure you noticed him. He lined up inside, watched what was happening in front of him, and waited. For a runner like me, that could be a bigger problem than a linebacker coming downhill too fast. A lot of my game depended on getting a defender to commit. I wanted that linebacker to lean a little too far, take one step inside, get caught behind a blocker for half a second, give me that little mistake, and I could be through the crease before he had time to fix it. Harry did not give you many of those steps. That day, I carried the ball 20 times and finished with 39 yards. You do not need much more explanation than that. We kept looking for room, and New York kept taking it away. There was no single spectacular moment that explains Carson. That was the point. He played inside linebacker with patience. He could deal with the traffic in front of him without immediately taking himself out of the play. He stayed square. He watched the backfield. And when the hole finally showed itself, he was usually moving toward the same place the runner wanted to go. That is hard on a back who lives on daylight. Speed is a wonderful thing until you pick the wrong door. Against a player like Carson, you could not treat every carry as a race. You had to let things develop. You had to press the hole long enough to make the defense show its hand. If you made your decision too early, a disciplined linebacker had the advantage. And Harry was disciplined. We lost that game in overtime, 13-10. Dallas had been able to move the football against plenty of teams that season, but that afternoon, every rushing yard felt harder to find. That is what I associate with Carson. Not theatrics, not one famous collision, just a man in the middle who kept making the field seem smaller. Years later, that is something I can appreciate even more. Young runners love speed because speed feels like freedom. Defenders like Harry Carson remind you that football is also about patience. He made me respect that. But the next linebacker on this list brought another problem entirely. Sometimes it seemed like he knew where the play was going before the rest of us got there. Number 4, Mike Singletary. I was 31 when Chicago came into Texas Stadium in 1985. I had played enough football by then that I did not walk onto a field believing any defense could surprise me. That afternoon changed that a little. Mike Singletary was standing in the middle of a defense that seemed to close every door almost as soon as we saw it. What I remember about a linebacker like Mike was how little wasted movement there was. As a running back, you watch linebackers closely. If a man stepped too far toward one gap, you could cut behind him. If his shoulders turned, you had something to work with. Sometimes all I needed was one bad step. Mike did not give away many bad steps. He watched. That sounds simple until you are carrying the football and waiting for him to make a decision. I always believed in my speed. Once I saw daylight, I wanted to get there before somebody could take it away. Against Chicago, the problem was that Singletary was reading the same picture from the other side. He could stay square, let the blocks begin to develop, then move when he knew where the runner had committed. It felt like trying to get through a door while somebody on the other side already had his hand on the handle. That day became ugly for us quickly. Chicago beat us 44-0. I carried the ball 12 times for 44 yards. Their defense scored, pressured our quarterbacks, forced turnovers, and kept us from ever settling into the kind of football we wanted to play. You remember days like that. Nobody in our locker room needed a long explanation afterward. There are games where you can point to one mistake and say that was where everything changed. This was not one of them. Chicago controlled the afternoon, and Singletary was right in the middle of it. The older I got, the more I understood why players like him bothered running back so much. It was not because he was chasing you around trying to make every tackle himself. He understood where the football was supposed to go. That meant you could not simply run faster and expect the problem to disappear. You had to be patient. That was difficult for me sometimes. When you have spent your life trusting your first step and your acceleration, patience can feel like hesitation. They are not the same thing. Players like Mike taught you the difference. I never enjoyed remembering that afternoon in Dallas. Nobody enjoys remembering 44-0. But I can respect what was on the other side of it. Harry Carson made me work for the opening. Mike Singletary could make me wonder whether the opening was really there at all. And then there was the next man. With him, you did not have much time to wonder about anything. You knew the collision was coming. Number 3, Jack Lambert. I was 24 when we met Pittsburgh in Super Bowl 13 at the Orange Bowl. I had already learned that the NFL could humble you in a hurry, but that afternoon felt different. Pittsburgh had a defense with a reputation that reached you before the game did, and in the middle of it was Jack Lambert. The first thing I remember was not his size. It was the attitude. Lambert played as if every yard belonged to him personally, and you were trying to take something off his property. As a running back, you could feel that kind of defender even when he was not making the tackle. My game was built on getting through the first crease and making the next man miss. I wanted to hit the opening before it closed. Lambert wanted to make sure the opening never felt comfortable. He played downhill, but he was not reckless. That is what made him difficult. If all a linebacker wanted to do was hit you, you could use that aggression against him. Let him come too hard, make one cut, and suddenly he was behind the play. Lambert did not give you that gift very often. He could attack the run and still stay alive in the play. He understood angles. He understood where the help was coming from. Once he got close enough, you knew the run was probably going to end with contact. I actually ran the ball well that day. I finished with 96 yards on 16 carries. There were moments when we found room against a defense that did not give much away, but that is part of why I remember the game so clearly. You can have a good afternoon as a runner and still leave the field feeling like you spent 3 hours fighting for every clean step. We lost 35-31. That score stayed with me because we were close enough to believe we could have changed it. When a Super Bowl ends that way, you replay little pieces of it for a long time. One cut, one block, one possession. You start wondering where 4 points might have been hiding. Lambert was part of what made Pittsburgh feel that way. They never allowed you to relax into the game. Looking back, I respected that. When I was younger, I thought toughness meant getting hit and getting back up. That was part of it. But men like Lambert taught me another side. Toughness was knowing contact was coming and still trusting the read, still making the cut, still going through the hole. You could not run carefully against Jack Lambert. If you did, he had already beaten you. He made you commit to the run. The next man on my list was different. He did not make me think first about the collision. He made me think about how much work had been done before either of us walked onto the field. Number 2, Randy Gradishar. When I think about Randy Gradishar, I do not think first about one hit. I think about how prepared he always seemed to be. I was 23 when we faced Denver in Super Bowl 12 in New Orleans. I was still a rookie, still learning how quickly a defense could take away something that had looked open on film. Denver had that Orange Crush defense, and Randy was right in the middle of it. That was where he belonged. As a runner, I liked defenders who told me what they were doing. If a linebacker came downhill too early, I could cut away from him. If he widened too fast, I could get inside. The hardest men were the ones who waited long enough to see the same picture I was seeing. Randy could do that. He understood angles. He understood where the blocking was trying to take him. He did not need to chase every movement in the backfield because he trusted what he had studied. By the time you committed to the hole, he was already closing the space you wanted. I carried the ball 15 times that day for 66 yards and scored a touchdown. We won 27-10. So when I look back, I am not telling you Denver stopped me completely. That would not be true. What I remember is how much attention their middle gave you. You had to know where Randy was. On inside runs, you had to understand how quickly he could scrape across the formation. On a cutback, you could not assume he had been washed out of the play. And if the play reached short yardage, there was no confidence seeing him waiting there. Years later, when I was asked about Randy, I said he was second to none in preparation and competitiveness. I meant it. Young players sometimes think preparation belongs to coaches and quarterbacks. Running backs learn differently. You learn that film can tell you which defender takes one false step, who reaches instead of moving his feet, who loses sight of the ball when the guard pulls. Randy did not give you many easy answers. That stayed with me. Lambert taught me to accept the collision. Gradishar made me understand that a great linebacker could make the collision happen on his terms because he had done part of the work before Sunday ever arrived. That is why Randy belongs this high on my list. Still, there was one defender who changed something even earlier than that. Before I looked for the hole, before I trusted the block in, before the ball was even snapped, I wanted to know exactly where he was. Number one, Lawrence Taylor. The first time Lawrence Taylor came into our division in 1981, you could tell pretty quickly that the Giants had found something different. I had already seen great linebackers. I had been hit by strong men, chased by fast men, and spent plenty of Sundays trying to make one defender take the wrong step. But Lawrence created another problem. You could not treat him like somebody who only mattered after the handoff. You had to find him before the snap. That is the biggest reason he is number one on my list. A running back has more jobs than people see. Everybody remembers the carries. They remember to cut the open field, maybe the touchdown. They do not always remember the plays when your responsibility is to recognize pressure, step into the backfield, and keep a linebacker away from your quarterback. With Lawrence, that part of the job became serious in a hurry. He could line up outside and make the edge feel shorter than it really was. If the tackle got too wide, he could come underneath. If you waited on him, he could turn speed into power. And if you became too concerned with where he started, the Giants could move him and make you solve the problem all over again. That is what separated him from me. Harry Carson could make a hole disappear. Mike Singletary could read where a play was going. Jack Lambert made you accept a collision. Randy Gradishar made you respect preparation. Lawrence could bring all of those thoughts into one snap. I remember that 1981 season because we saw him when he was still a rookie, and by the end of the year, nobody was treating him like one. In our final regular season meeting at Giant Stadium, the game went into overtime. Lost the ball on a pitch, and Lawrence recovered it. We eventually lost 13-10. A play like that stays with you. I do not need to turn it into something bigger than it was. I made a mistake. He was there to take advantage of it. That is football. But when you play a man twice a year, season after season, one play becomes part of a larger picture. You study him, you prepare for him, then Sunday comes and you still have to locate him again. That is why he is first. He affected the run game. He affected protection. He affected what you thought about before the ball moved. The toughest defenders did not always beat you with one tackle. Sometimes they made you spend the whole week making sure they did not. Lawrence Taylor did that to me more than anybody else. When I look back now, I do not remember these men because they made football miserable. I remember them because they made me better. Harry Carson taught me that patience could close a running lane just as quickly as speed. Mike Singletary taught me that a defender who understood the play could take away an advantage before I ever reached the line. Jack Lambert reminded me that sometimes there was no way around the collision. You had to go through it. Randy Gradishar made me respect preparation. And Lawrence Taylor made me understand that the hardest opponent could get into your thinking before the ball was even snapped. That is what stays with me. People see the long runs, they see the open field, and remember the moments when everything worked. A running back remembers the other part too. The body's in a gap, the linebacker waiting inside, the defender who forced you to make a different decision than the one you wanted to make. I found a lot of daylight in my career. But those 5 men taught me how valuable daylight really was. Records tell people how far you ran. The men who tried to stop you tell you what those yards were worth.